The story follows Helen Walker, a 63-year-old mother who has spent her life taking care of her family, from cooking, cleaning, and caring for the children to paying for her son and daughter-in-law's house. Despite her constant sacrifices, Helen feels unappreciated, especially when she is criticized for not cooking one day due to illness. Her relationship with her daughter-in-law, Kayla, becomes increasingly tense as Kayla fails to recognize Helen's sacrifices. Helen decides she can no longer tolerate this and starts reclaiming a part of her own life, keeping track of everything she has done for the family over the past 8 years. After receiving an opportunity to work at a community theater, Helen chooses to rebuild her life, focusing on self-care and stepping out of the shadow of her family, no longer worrying about pleasing everyone. If this story touched you, made you think, or inspired you in any way, I invite you to leave a comment and share your thoughts. If you're ready to take control of your life and build the future you deserve, hit the like button to let me know you're with me on this journey. And don't forget to subscribe, because there's always more stories, more inspiration, and more powerful moments to come. I curled up tightly in bed, wrapped in layers of blankets like a cocoon. But it did nothing to stop the chills. My head was pounding, my throat raw and burning like I'd swallowed a mouthful of gravel. Outside, the wind howled with that bone-deep cold that only came near the ocean, damp and piercing. It slipped through the gaps in the window frame and slapped against my face in sharp, stinging bursts. I hadn't gotten out of bed all day. Even reaching for a sip of water felt like a full-body effort. Shaky arms, trembling hands, a cough that rattled through me like loose nails in a tin can. Suddenly, the clatter of pots and pans rang out from the kitchen, followed by Michael's impatient voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Mom, are you still not getting up? What are we supposed to eat?" His words stabbed straight into my chest. I forced myself upright a little, swallowing against the fire in my throat. "There's stew from yesterday. Just heat it up. It's already made." Before I could even finish, Rebecca's voice tore through the closed bedroom door, sharp and scathing. "I've been married into this family for 8 years. When have you ever not taken care of everything, and now you catch a little cold and just give up? I'm going to my mom's. At least I can eat in peace there." Bang! The front door slammed so hard the windows shuddered in their frames. I lay back down, my limbs cold as ice, but my chest burning like a knife had been heated and pressed into my ribs. She walked out in a rage because I hadn't cooked for one day, and my son Michael just stood there at the door, his face dark and stormy, his eyes filled with blame and irritation, like I was the one ruining their day. "Why do you have to go and piss her off?" he muttered coldly, then turned away, disappearing into the hallway without even glancing at the mess left behind in the kitchen. I couldn't speak. My throat locked up like someone had jammed cotton and shame into it. For 8 years, ever since their wedding day, I had been wound up like a clock, never once letting a meal go cold on the table. Up before the sun every morning, cooking, scrubbing, folding their laundry. I washed their socks by hand, for God's sake. When Rebecca was pregnant, I stayed up at night making chicken broth, hovering like a nursemaid, more attentive than her own mother. After Ethan was born, the moment I heard a cry, I'd jump up and rock him before he even stirred, scared to death of disturbing their sleep. But now, because I was sick for a single day, I had become an inconvenience, a burden. I shut my eyes. My chest tightened and my nose stung as the tears came quiet and hot, slipping down my cheeks without a sound. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 63 years old, and I live in the quiet town of Santa Clara, California. Back in the day, my husband and I both worked at a local lighting factory. We scraped together enough to send our son Michael to community college. After my husband passed away, it was just me holding things down. 8 years ago, Michael brought Rebecca home and told me they were getting married. I emptied my life savings to buy them a house, paid for renovations, and even borrowed money from friends to cover their wedding. I thought they'd be grateful, but it didn't take long to realize I was just a living maid who worked for free. Every morning, I was the first one up to cook breakfast. Every night, I had dinner ready and warm on the table. When they decided to have a child, I was there for everything. Every diaper, every late night cry. If little Ethan wet the bed at night, I was the one up washing the sheets. I never complained. Rebecca grew used to it. She stopped lifting a finger. She wouldn't even wash her own clothes anymore. Just tossed them into the laundry basket and expected them to magically appear clean and folded. Michael never said a word to her. I guess this was what moms were supposed to do. And I tried to push back, to speak up. I remember one winter night, Ethan had a high fever. I rushed him to the ER and sat there all night holding his sweaty little hand while the machines beeped and buzzed. When we finally got home in the morning, I collapsed on the couch, coat still on, and fell asleep. When I woke up, Rebecca was standing in the living room with a look that could crack stone. "Seriously, Mom? You didn't clean up? Look at this place. What a disaster." She jabbed her finger toward a few empty snack wrappers on the coffee table like I just ruined her life. My throat tightened. I explained barely above a whisper. "I took Ethan to the ER last night. I was just too exhausted. Maybe it's time you helped out a bit too." She rolled her eyes and gave a bitter laugh. "Oh, please, we work all day. If we all stopped doing things just because we were tired, we'd never eat, would we?" And with that, she shot me a glare and stormed back to her room, slamming the door behind her. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. My fists curled so tight my nails dug into my palms. But in the end, I didn't argue. I just got up and started picking up trash. That day, I learned to shut my mouth, to swallow it all, and keep quiet. But today, I couldn't do it anymore. I had a fever. My throat felt like barbed wire. My whole body ached, like I'd been wrung out. I just wanted one day, just one, to rest. And even that was too much to ask. The house had fallen quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with resentment. I could still hear the echo of Rebecca slamming the front door. Michael's voice, cold and clipped, still rang in my ears. Every word felt like a blade slipping beneath my ribs. What was I supposed to do? From the kitchen, the faucet was still dripping. I was standing at the sink, scrubbing the pot I hadn't finished washing last night, when I heard Rebecca shuffle in slippers, the sound of them smacking against the tile. She gave me a once-over. "Didn't you say you were too sick to move yesterday?" I didn't answer, just placed the clean lid on the pot and reached into the fridge for a few potatoes. She grabbed a cup of coffee off the fridge and tossed another line over her shoulder. "Better clean up those toys in the living room before Ethan comes down for breakfast." After she left, I closed the kitchen door behind her. On the counter sat a pile of receipts, grocery lists, and utility bills. I began sorting them into plastic zipper bags. My first step in a new system I decided on last night. I'd still cook for now, but from this day forward, I'd be writing down exactly how much every meal cost to make. I didn't mention that I'd also dug out the copy of the house contract from 2018. Found it in the back of the storage closet, sealed it in a fresh plastic sleeve. When the kitchen was spotless, I walked into my room and reached for the old leather suitcase tucked high on the closet shelf. It had belonged to my husband. I'd never had the heart to throw it out. Over the years, I'd added all kinds of things to it. Photos, Michael's old school awards, the tiny socks I'd knit for Ethan the year he was born, and a stack of bank statements and mortgage payment slips I'd quietly saved just in case. I pulled out the one on top, a record of the $134,000 I transferred to Michael 5 years ago. The memo line read, "Kitchen renovation." I printed out a fresh copy of the transfer receipt and tucked it into a bright yellow folder. On the cover, I stuck a note, "Money I paid. Don't forget." Rebecca didn't come downstairs for lunch. I left the food on the stove, set to low heat, and sat on the couch, flipping through old emails on my tablet. One message caught my eye, an unexpected one from Rachel, a former co-worker from the lighting factory, and more importantly, my old partner from our part-time days building stage sets for the local theater. "The Santa Clara Theater's putting on a light-hearted comedy for New Year's," she wrote. "We're looking for someone with experience to help design and build the set. The pay is modest, but we can do hourly. If you're available, we'd really love your help." It had been years since I'd seen Rachel. I stared at that email for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. A toy car rolled across the hardwood floor and bumped softly into my foot. I bent down to pick it up and straighten the stack of picture books scattered nearby. It wasn't that I didn't have the energy to clean. I did. I just started choosing what was worth cleaning up. Later that afternoon, I went to the grocery store, but this time I bought only what I needed, my prescription refill and a small pre-packaged meal for one. When I walked in, Rebecca was leaning against the kitchen doorway. Her eyes went straight to the bag in my hand. "You didn't get eggs?" she asked. "I forgot," I said. She frowned. We were going to start giving Ethan more eggs this week. Before she could finish, I'd already tucked the medication into my drawer, hung the shopping bag behind the door, and headed to my room. The door clicked shut behind me. From the kitchen, I could still hear her muttering, "Evelyn, your memory's really getting worse lately." I sat down on the edge of my bed and opened the yellow folder again. On top, I stuck a new note. "Today, the clock starts." A faint burnt smell drifted from the kitchen. I didn't move. The soft hiss of boiling soup reached me through the walls. It wasn't until Michael's voice rang out, "Mom, is dinner ready yet?" that I finally stood up to turn off the stove. Dinner went on as usual. Ethan mashed peas with a spoon. Rebecca scrolled through her phone, and Michael complained again that the pasta was too firm. I didn't reply. I just cleared the plates and carried them into the kitchen. That's when Rebecca finally spoke, her tone as lazy as ever. "Oh, right, Evelyn. Didn't you say some old co-worker of yours asked you to help with a stage thing? You're not actually thinking about doing that, are you? I mean, at your age, what help could you even be? And it's so far away. Where would you even stay?" She paused, then added, "You should just stay here and help with Ethan. I mean, if we do end up moving closer to a better school, what would you even do here all by yourself?" I stood at the sink rinsing the dishes. The water kept running. I didn't say a word. She was already talking about me being left behind, about this house not being for me. Her voice floated on. "I told Michael, this place won't make sense for us if Ethan starts school across town. You keeping the house would just be pointless." She was saying, "You'll have nowhere to go." I didn't argue. I didn't answer. I simply looked over at her through the kitchen doorway and smiled. She didn't notice. She'd already gone back to scrolling her phone. She had no idea I'd already replied to Rachel's email the night before. "I'm in." That was all I wrote. Simple, final. I didn't hesitate for a second when I hit send. Rachel responded almost immediately. "Fantastic. Our first production meeting is next week. You can help us test out the lighting and prop layouts. We'll pay hourly." I had built sets for over 30 years. I'd hauled lumber, hammered frames, sketched backdrops by hand. There wasn't a single person in that theater who would ever say Evelyn couldn't handle it, but I had no intention of explaining any of that to Rebecca. She didn't need to know what I was still capable of. She just needed to wake up one morning, realize the house was quiet, and wonder to herself, where did Evelyn go? After dinner, Michael took Ethan to his taekwondo class. Rebecca stayed on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Halfway through a video, she suddenly glanced up. "Evelyn, hey, I was wondering if I could ask you a quick favor." I gave a non-committal hum. He tested the waters. "I've got a little get-together with some girlfriends tomorrow. Could you pick Ethan up from school?" I asked Michael, but there's some emergency at work, and he can't get away. I was unloading the dishwasher, drying each plate with a clean cloth. "Sure," I said simply. She exhaled in relief. "Great, thank you." I walked into the living room and pulled a few crumpled snack wrappers from between the couch cushions, tossing them into the trash. "You're pretty thorough. I'll give you that," she said, half distracted. I turned to her and smiled. "Yeah, I remember more than you think." She blinked, confused by the comment, but I didn't elaborate. What she didn't know was that I hadn't stopped keeping track. Every grocery refill, every dollar spent, Michael's full bank account name, every single time Rebecca handed me something to just take care of real quick. Even the package she asked me to mail last week, I'd taken a picture of it. The recipient was her sister, but the sender's name was mine. I didn't ask her why. I just quietly began reclaiming everything that had ever been filed, signed, or borrowed under my name. These days, whenever she asked me to do her a favor, I smiled and nodded, and whenever she assumed I had no other choice, I made sure the key to the door was in my pocket. She thought I had nowhere to go, but what she didn't realize was I'd already gone farther than she could imagine. The next morning, while Rebecca was out having brunch with friends and Michael was at the office, I slipped on a pair of worn-in walking shoes, slung a canvas tote over my shoulder, and quietly stepped out the door. The theater had invited me to watch a rehearsal that day to get a feel for the space. Winter mornings in Santa Clara were always damp and cold, the kind of chill that wrapped around your neck and made you walk a little faster. I hunched my shoulders against it and headed toward the community center. A faded banner hung at the front entrance, Theater Revival Project, Rebuild Together. Rachel was already waiting outside. When she saw me, her arms opened wide. "Evelyn, you haven't changed a bit," I smiled. "Oh, I've changed. My mind's clearer. My hands might be slower." She laughed and led me inside, chatting as we went, pointing out the stage zones, the lighting rigs, the fresh-faced kids managing props. "What we really need," she said, "is someone who knows what to look for, who knows when to tighten a bolt before it squeaks, or when to add a second layer of tape, even if the first one looks fine." I nodded slowly, my eyes sweeping across the wooden frames and painted flats, structures as familiar to me as my own kitchen drawers. No, this wasn't the kitchen where I'd spent the last decade scrubbing dishes and cooking meals without thanks, but I knew how to make this space hold steady, just like I'd held up that house for years alone with hands that never let it fall. When I came home at noon, the house was empty. I unpacked the groceries I'd picked up on the way back. Nothing much, just a few vegetables, and carefully filed the receipts into the labeled plastic folders I'd prepared ahead of time. I jotted down notes on how I planned to use each item. Then I turned on the laptop and created a new spreadsheet, Carter Household Informal Expense Log, Private Record. I started inputting everything I documented so far: Rebecca's package I mailed for her, Michael's request for help ordering new sneakers, along with the size and product link, the last refrigerator restock, including the date and full item list. Every single link was backed by a screenshot. Every casual favor came with a timestamp. This wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was a record of labor, full, precise, and mine. After dinner, I was washing the dishes. Rebecca finished eating, dumped the last spoonful of chicken soup down the sink, and walked off without even glancing at me. As she dried her hands, she tossed a casual remark over her shoulder. "So, did you really not find any eggs, or did you just forget?" I dried the lid of a pot. "The store I went to was out. I kept the receipt." She didn't respond, but I heard it, the little edge of doubt in her voice. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I sat at the dining table, laptop open again. I locked the day's receipts, line by line. Lunch, chicken breast, plus pea mash. Ingredients, $15.20. Just as I hit enter, Rebecca came down the stairs. Her footsteps were unusually light, like she didn't want to be noticed. She stood behind me for a moment before finally speaking. "You've been logging all this. What for?" I didn't turn around. I simply reached out and closed the window against the chill. "I just want things to be clear," I said. She took a sharp breath, voice rising. "Are you checking up on us? Keeping a tally? You think we owe you now?" I looked up at her calmly. "I'm not keeping track of you. I'm keeping track of what I've done." She stood there, eyes fixed on the glowing screen. "You're saving this just in case, right?" she said, her tone colder now. "In case one day you need it?" I said nothing. She let out a bitter laugh and turned back toward the stairs. The creak of the old wood echoed through the quiet house like a warning shot. I locked the document with a password and shut the laptop. My fingers hovered on the edge of the table for a few seconds before slowly pulling away. After lunch the next day, I wiped down the kitchen counter. Rebecca was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, munching on chips while chatting with a friend on speaker. She's been acting so weird lately, keeping records, snapping photos, even recording audio. You think she's planning to sue us or something. God, I made one comment about her being stingy and she flipped. She laughed easily, amused, like she was recounting a funny little misunderstanding. At the dining table, I finished copying down today's grocery list, then stood up and headed to the kitchen to marinate some beef. From behind me, she called out, "Evelyn, make sure you cook enough steak tonight. Michael loves it. And don't salt the eggs this time. Ethan said they were too salty." "Okay," I replied softly. Just then, Michael came down the stairs, flipping through his wallet. "Mom, did you take my credit card?" I didn't answer that question. I looked up and asked evenly, "The last time you used that card, it was mine, wasn't it? You used it to buy Ethan that new game controller, right?" He paused, caught off guard, and for once, he had nothing to say. I stepped into the kitchen and opened the fridge, pulling out the beef I'd marinated the night before. Just as I turned toward the sink to rinse it, Rebecca got up from the couch and tossed a bag of dirty laundry onto the chair behind me. "Evelyn, could you throw this in with the wash? We're heading out soon." I stared at the bag for a few seconds, then turned to look at the sink. The water was already boiling. Steam fogged up my glasses. I pulled them off and wiped the lenses with the edge of my sleeve. Then she added, "By the way, have you been a little moody lately? Michael says, you've barely been speaking. Look, we get that you're tired, but if you don't do these things, who will?" Michael was still standing by the dining room door, thumbing through his phone. "Yeah, Mom, don't make everything so emotional. This isn't a company. No one's asking for itemized reports." I kept wiping my glasses, slower now. "Mom, what are you doing?" Rebecca asked, a hint of annoyance in her voice. I didn't answer. The pot slipped from my hand and crashed into the sink. Boiling water splashed, some drops landing on her new dress. She jumped back, her expression twisting instantly. "Did you do that on purpose?" I looked up at her. Really looked. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "did it ever occur to you that this pot maybe? It was never mine to wash in the first place?" She froze. Michael's brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean, Mom?" I set the cloth down, my voice even. "I mean, you eat without saying thank you. You put bills and purchases in my name. Now you're tossing dirty pots my way like it's just my job. I've cooked more meals, washed more clothes, and paid for more things over these 8 years than either of you have. But I'm not your maid." Rebecca opened her mouth. "Evelyn, are you what? Menopausal?" I let out a sudden laugh. "Whether I am or not doesn't matter. What matters is this. Starting today, I won't be paying for your expenses anymore, and I'm not washing anything that doesn't belong to me." Michael's tone sharpened. "Mom, come on, don't be like this." I was calmer than either of them. Silence dropped heavy over the kitchen. From the stairs, a small voice broke through. Ethan peeked down, eyes wide. "Grandma, are you mad?" I walked over and gently smoothed his hair. "No, sweetheart, I just finally understood something." "What?" he asked. "That's time I take care of me." After dinner, I went back to my room, untied my apron, and sat on the edge of the bed. I picked up my phone. The message from Rachel was still open. "Rehearsals officially begin next week. You'll be managing the backstage props area. The equipment's a little outdated, but you're more reliable than any gear we've got." I typed back, "I'll be there on time." Tuesday morning at 7:30, I slipped into a navy blue work shirt, tied my hair into a low ponytail, and grabbed my canvas tool bag. From upstairs, Rebecca called out, "Evelyn, where are you going?" "You've been out a lot lately." Standing by the door, I slipped on my shoes. "Just taking care of something. I'll be back before dinner." She didn't press. Lately, she'd grown quieter, more cautious, especially after Michael caught a glimpse of my ledger the other night and muttered, "Mom, don't be so paranoid." That was when I realized they'd rather believe I was overreacting than face the fact that I'd started waking up. The Santa Clara Community Theater sat behind a modest neighborhood center. The stage was an old black box. The lighting rigs looked like something salvaged from the 90s. But the moment I stepped inside, everything snapped into focus. There are no dishes, no bills, no one telling me I should do this or should do that. Diana came over and gave me a big hug. You look younger than the last time I saw you, I grinned. Might be because I'm not wearing an apron. We started with the first flat, just the frame and a curled up bit of wallpaper. I sealed the edge with tape while one of the younger assistants fumbled nearby. He watched me work, then let out a low whistle. You're really good at this. This job doesn't take talent, I said. Just practice. You screw in light mounts for 30 years. It becomes second nature. He sighed. I don't think I'll last 3 months, I smiled at him. Then you've probably never needed the paycheck bad enough. Before we wrapped for lunch, Diana handed me a small envelope. Inside was a signed time slip and a $20 coffee gift card. This is just the beginning, she said. We've got another production coming up. We're thinking about offering you lead set designer. You're not worried? I asked. I'm too old to keep up, she shrugged. I worry more about people who don't show up. You show up, I'll give you a shot. I tucked the envelope into my bag and felt something I hadn't in years. Not someone wanting me, but I still wanted myself. When I got home that evening, it was nearly 6. The kitchen was quiet. On the table was a handwritten note from Rebecca. You got back too late. We went out to eat. Figure out dinner yourself. And for once, I didn't feel hurt. I felt light. So I grabbed my purse and treated myself to dinner out. I was learning to be kind to me, and this time it felt like living. Friday morning, Rebecca stood in the kitchen doorway, flipping through her planner. Mom, can you run to the store later? Ethan needs healthy lunches for school next week. I was sealing up a bag of leftover screws from the theater, prepping to bring them back for repairs. I didn't respond. She didn't think much of it, just turned and went back to her bedroom, assuming, like always, that I was still the same Evelyn who said yes to everything. What she didn't know was that I had already started moving my life, piece by piece, out of this house. The first thing I moved was my insurance. 2 days ago, I called my pension account manager and updated my mailing address and emergency contact. Michael's name came off the form. I replaced it with Diana's email. She's an old friend, I told the customer service rep. Someone I trust. My son's just too busy these days. I don't want to burden him. The woman on the line didn't argue. She just tapped a few keys, made the changes, and confirmed the update. Next, I canceled the joint credit card I used to share with Michael. His name had been on the secondary card. Not anymore. The second thing I moved was my belongings. I pulled the old brown suitcase down from the top of my closet. I wrapped it in a soft towel and tucked it inside a storage cabinet in the back of the theater's prop room. No one asked why I brought a suitcase to work. Everyone at the theater was too busy to care what you were carrying, as long as you did your job right. At lunchtime, I didn't go home. Diana took me to a little Mexican diner around the corner. Over plates of tacos and warm rice, she glanced up from her food and said, You know, before you came, our old prop guy used to show up late every other day. Half the time, the backdrop was hanging crooked. I laughed. Well, even if I skip a day now, this place won't fall apart. She narrowed her eyes at me playfully. You sure you're not a little too good at this? It's not that I'm good, I said, setting down my fork. I just came from a place where if I didn't do it, no one would. She didn't press, just reached into her bag and slid a contract across the table. A part-time position for next season's production. Think it over. Take it home. I nodded and took it, feeling something settle in me. Not excitement, not nerves, just calm. Like something was finally beginning to fit into place. That afternoon, when I got home, Rebecca was out on the balcony hanging laundry. She didn't see what I carried in. A heavy-duty folder, zipped tight. Inside were the documents I'd quietly gathered, records of my financial contributions to the house, screenshots of bank transfers from the purchase, and a savings account card that was still under my name. Michael didn't know about that account. It still held $20,000. Money I'd scraped together working 3 jobs the year he and Rebecca got engaged. They never asked how much I had. They just assumed I'd give them everything. But starting today, that card was mine again. I would reactivate it, and every transaction logged for my eyes only. On Sunday morning, sunlight poured across the kitchen floor, warm and slanted like a quiet blessing. I had just sat down the coffee pot when the doorbell rang. Michael stood there, his expression stiff. Behind him was Rebecca, holding Ethan, her face worn thin with fatigue. "Mom," Michael said, "can we talk for a minute?" I nodded and let them into the kitchen. They exchanged a glance once they were seated. Michael spoke first. "Did you, cancel the secondary credit card recently?" I set my coffee mug down and answered evenly. "Yes." I didn't want it tied to my name anymore. Rebecca's face immediately tightened. "Evelyn, you didn't even tell us. We tried to check out yesterday and the card got declined." I looked at her directly. "That's not my problem." Silence settled like a thick fog. Michael tried to smooth it over. "We're not mad. If something's going on, maybe we could talk it out." "Oh, something's going on," I said, calm as ever. "This house, I paid for most of it. I covered the bulk of the down payment and helped finish off your loan. I'm not kicking you out, but I am taking back what's mine, what I contributed. It's time it was acknowledged." Rebecca narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean? You want the title changed? You're trying to take the house back?" I pulled open the kitchen drawer and laid a clear folder on the table. Inside were copies, dozens of them, transfer receipts, bank statements, old screenshots with time-stamped annotations. "This," I said, "is the transfer I made for your down payment. Here's the wire I sent for the kitchen remodel. And this," I tapped the final page, "is the mortgage payment I covered for your first year here." Michael stared down, stunned. He had never taken the time to look at these numbers before. "I didn't keep these because I want to get anything back," I said softly. "I kept them to remind you this house has been standing for 8 years, and for those 8 years, I've cooked the meals, washed the dishes, babysat your child. But my name, it's nowhere on the deed." Rebecca scoffed, her voice sharp. "So what? You want your name added? You want the place signed over?" I stood and slid the folder toward them. "No, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just done carrying the consequences of decisions you made. Starting next month, I'm not paying another cent for the gas, electricity, or water. The mortgage, you'll handle it. Ethan's after-school programs? That's between his parents." Michael opened his mouth. "Mom, it's just, we're stretched thin sometimes." "I know," I said, glancing at him, "but that's not on me anymore. Who scrubs the pan? Who foots the bill? It's time that became clear." Rebecca's jaw clenched. Michael looked like he was searching for a lifeline. Then Ethan let go of Rebecca and ran to me, wrapping his arms around my leg. "Grandma, you're not leaving, right?" I crouched down and smoothed his hair. "Not yet, sweetie. I'm just not going to be the person everyone pushes things onto anymore." After they left, I returned to the kitchen, sealed the documents back in their folder, and locked it away in my bedroom drawer. Not because I was hiding something, but because this time I knew exactly what I was protecting. That night, Kayla did the dishes. Michael mopped the floor. The house was quiet, eerily so, as if no one actually lived there. And for the first time, I sat on the couch and watched an entire episode of a show. No glancing at the stove, no checking if the fridge needed restocking. The TV played to no audience. I sat there, the ledger on my lap, open to its final page. At the top, I wrote the date. Then I drew a single line beneath it, and after that, I wrote nothing. Not because I couldn't, but because there was nothing left to track. What needed giving, I had given. What was worth keeping, I had kept. This book should have been closed a long time ago. "Mom, can we talk?" Michael's voice came from the kitchen doorway. In his hand was a letter. He stepped closer and laid it on the table in front of me. A formal notice from the bank. Kayla's name officially removed from the secondary credit card. "I got this today," he said. "Is this really happening?" I looked down at the letter. "Yes, I notified the bank. That's just their confirmation." He rubbed his palms together, his voice quieter now. "So, you're serious?" "You're really stepping back." I looked at him and nodded gently. But you said you were just organizing things, he said, his tone rising. You said this was just about sorting it all out. I closed the ledger and met his eyes. I did sort it out. The sound of a dripping faucet echoed from the kitchen, soft, steady, like a clock ticking down. He stared at the letter, lips pressed tight. Then he looked at me again, unsettled. Are you mad at us? I didn't answer because I wasn't. Anger meant I still cared enough to want change, to fight, to fix. But now I just wanted out. Rebecca didn't speak to me the entire day. She didn't cook dinner either. The kitchen stayed empty. Michael ordered takeout. The three of them ate in silence. Ethan, sweet boy, snuck a chicken nugget into the corner of the box and whispered to me, Grandma, this one's for you. I shook my head. Thank you, sweetheart, but I'm not hungry. He pushed the box toward me. You always said wasting food is bad. I smiled and stroked his hair. That night, under the warm desk light in my bedroom, I signed the part-time contract from the theater. It was due back the next morning. The next afternoon, I closed my door and sealed the final envelope. A list not for them, but for myself. At the bottom, in firm strokes, I wrote 4 words. No more open tabs. I left the house key on the kitchen table. Next to it, a simple handwritten note. I don't want the house. What I gave you before, consider it a gift. From now on, separate lives, separate responsibilities. Evelyn. 2 days later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping a cup of tea I'd brewed just for myself. The sunlight warmed my knees. Beside me were next month's rehearsal script from the theater and a novel I'd borrowed from the library. My phone lit up, a message from Michael. Mom, are you there? I didn't reply. I just powered off the screen, stood up, and got ready to leave. The theater was setting up lights tonight, and I was needed for the build. The switch in the new rehearsal hall was temperamental. When you flipped it, the lights flickered a few times before holding steady. I stood backstage near the set scaffolding, tool bag at my feet, brush in hand. One of the young crew members rolled the final backdrop panel into place. Hey, Evelyn, he called out. This one's all yours. We're heading up to rig the lights. I nodded and crouched down, smoothing out the seam tape. There's something deeply quiet about this kind of work. No one asking what's for dinner, no one chasing me for bills, favors, or emotional labor. Just wood, fabric, glue. You do it right, they stay put. Unlike the things back home, which never came with instructions, never stayed in place. These days, I work full days at the theater every Wednesday and Thursday. Fridays, I attend a script rewriting group at the library. The rest of the week, my laundry, books, groceries, peace, living. I'd even restructured my retirement accounts, split into 3. One for daily spending, one marked travel fund, and a third that transfers automatically into a locked savings plan. No joint access, no co-signers, no secondary cards. And for the first time in my life, I looked at my monthly balance and thought, this money is mine to spend. One Saturday afternoon, Michael brought Ethan over to visit. He stood a little awkwardly at my front door. Kayla took her sister shopping. I thought maybe Ethan could see you for a bit. I didn't say much, just stepped aside and let them in. The moment Ethan saw me, he bolted into my arms. Grandma, can I sleep over tonight? Michael jumped in. No, buddy, you've got taekwondo later. I can take him, I said calmly. Really? Ethan's eyes lit up. Grandma, I brought a drawing for you. He fished a folded piece of paper from his backpack. On it, a shaky sketch of a stage. In the middle stood a gray-haired woman in an apron, hair tied up in a bun. That's you, he beamed. I took the picture and nodded. You did a great job. That's definitely me. I am building a stage. Are you really back on stage? He asked quietly. I am, I smiled. But this time, it's just for me. That night, on the way home, Michael drove in silence. At a red light, he finally spoke. Mom, you seem lighter lately. Happier, maybe. I looked out the window at the street lamp shadows swaying across the sidewalk. I am, I said. Then I turned to him. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. Not intentionally, but I used to fill in every gap. You reached out. I gave. You didn't say thank you. I assumed it was my job. It wasn't that you took advantage. It's that I made myself available for the taking, but I'm not doing that anymore." He nodded slowly. "I get it now, even if it took me too long." "It's not too late," I said. "You still have time to be a husband and father who doesn't live off someone else's sacrifice." He gave a small nod, and the light turned green. Back home, I pinned Ethan's drawing to the fridge. Then I made a cup of my new rose tea and sank into the couch. No one fought me for the remote. No one asked what was for breakfast tomorrow. This stage I'd built wasn't flashy. There were no spotlights, no applause. But for once, the person standing in the center of it was me. The following week, as the sun set and cast a golden hue over the city, I walked into the theater for another rehearsal. It was my third week working with the team, and I felt more alive with each passing day. The theater felt like home now, a place where I was valued for my skills, not just my willingness to serve others. I entered the familiar building, the smell of fresh paint and sawdust filling the air. The stage was set for a new production, and as I walked to the back, I noticed the crew was gathered, getting ready for a full rehearsal. Diana waved me over, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Evelyn, you're just in time," she said. "We need you to check the lights on the left stage wing before we run the scene again." I nodded, grabbing my toolkit, the familiar weight comforting in my hands. "You got it." I climbed the ladder to adjust the lights, and as I worked, I let my mind wander back to the house. Back to that quiet house where I used to be everything to everyone. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was a life I had given without asking for anything in return. Now, as I worked alongside young, passionate crew members, I realized that my worth didn't come from what I could do for others, but from what I could accomplish for myself. When the rehearsal wrapped up that evening, Diana and I grabbed a coffee from a nearby cafe, sitting at a small table by the window. "So, what's next for you, Evelyn?" she asked, stirring her drink. I looked out at the street, watching the people pass by, all with their own stories, their own journeys. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm starting to think that maybe the next chapter is all about me." Diana raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "That's a good chapter." "It's a scary one," I replied, "but I think I'm ready for it, ready to take on whatever comes next, and this time it's for me." Over the next few weeks, I settled into this new rhythm of life. I worked at the theater on Wednesdays and Thursdays, attending rehearsals and helping with set designs. On Fridays, I met up with Rachel and a few other friends for a casual dinner. I even started to take small trips, day trips to nearby towns, just to explore, just to be. The sense of freedom was intoxicating. At home, Michael and Rebecca continued their routine, and though the tension was still there, it was different now. There was an unspoken understanding that I was no longer their fallback, no longer someone they could rely on without acknowledging the cost of my sacrifices. I still visited Ethan when I could, and he loved spending time with me. But I began to feel the space I'd carved out for myself grow larger, more important. One afternoon, as I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, working on some set designs, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Michael was standing there holding a piece of paper in his hand. "Mom," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I wanted to bring this to you." He handed me the paper, and I recognized it immediately. It was a letter from the bank. "What's this?" I asked. "Kayla and we've been talking," Michael said hesitantly. "We realized that we never really understood everything you've done for us. The money, the house. We've decided it's time to make things right." I looked at the letter, and sure enough, it outlined the official transfer of ownership for the house. My name was finally on the deed. I blinked, not sure if I was seeing things clearly. For the first time in years, I was seeing something that was mine, completely mine. "I know it doesn't make up for everything," Michael continued, "but I want you to know that we're grateful, really grateful. I didn't understand what you went through." I took a deep breath, my heart swelling with a mix of relief and a tinge of sadness. "I never needed you to understand, Michael," I said softly. I just needed to stop giving without receiving. He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine for any sign of anger or resentment, but all I felt was peace. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know you are," I replied, "and that's enough." A few days later, I stood in the living room of my old house, now officially mine. The space felt different, not like the place where I had endlessly worked and given of myself, but rather as a place that had been part of my journey, a place I had helped build with my own hands and sacrifices. I ran my fingers over the smooth wooden table in the kitchen, the same one where I had spent countless hours preparing meals, cleaning up, and just being there for my family. The walls, the floors, they all held memories, both bitter and sweet. I heard a knock at the door, and when I opened it, I was surprised to find Ethan standing there, a grin on his face and a small envelope in his hand. "Grandma, I made something for you," he said, holding it out. I bent down to take the envelope from his small hands, my heart swelling. Inside, there was another drawing, a picture of a house, with a little figure standing in the doorway. The figure was smiling, and beneath the house, Ethan had written in big, bold letters, "This is your house, Grandma." My chest tightened, and for the first time in a long time, I let the tears come. Not out of sadness, but out of something deeper, gratitude, love, and a profound understanding of all I had endured and the life I was finally beginning to live on my terms. "Thank you, sweetie," I whispered, kneeling down to hug him tightly. "It's beautiful." We stood there for a moment, just holding each other. When we pulled apart, I smiled at him, wiping away my tears. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," I said softly. "You're going to grow up to be a wonderful person." Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with hues of orange and purple, the same colors that had been there all those years ago when I had sat here with my husband, dreaming of a life that was mine. Now, I understood that it was never too late to make those dreams a reality. The door behind me creaked open, and I turned to see Michael standing there, his hands in his pockets, looking a little unsure of himself. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said quietly. "I don't think I ever told you that, but I am." I smiled at him, my heart full. "I know you are, Michael, and I'm proud of you too." We stood in silence for a while, watching the sky slowly darken as the stars began to appear. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing in the shadow of my past, but rather in the light of my own future. "Are you going to stay here?" Michael asked, after a moment. I nodded. "For now, but I'm going to take care of me too. I have things to do, dreams to chase, places to go." He nodded, understanding. "I get it." I looked up at the sky again, my eyes reflecting the stars above. For once, I didn't feel like I was giving up anything. Instead, I was gaining everything. I had finally stepped into my own life, and it was more than I could have ever hoped for. The next day, I drove to the theater, the familiar hum of the engine beneath me calming my nerves. I was meeting Rachel for lunch, and we were going to discuss the next project. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something for me, and it was thrilling. I entered the theater, greeted by the familiar faces of the crew. There was a sense of belonging here, a place where I wasn't just a caretaker or a mother, but a creator, a worker, someone with a purpose. The stage was waiting for me, just as it always had been, and now I was ready to stand on it, not for anyone else, but for myself. As I walked toward the back of the stage, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. The work I did here mattered. The life I was building mattered. And most of all, I mattered. Over the next few weeks, I settled further into my new life. The rhythm of my days was peaceful, but fulfilling, each one more grounded than the last. I found joy in the small things, the feel of a paintbrush in my hand, the hum of the theater lights as they flickered to life, the laughter of my fellow crew members as we worked through another production. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Rachel and I became closer again. She kept offering me new projects, and while the work wasn't easy, I found fulfillment in it. The crew was always supportive, and I began mentoring some of the younger members, teaching them the tricks of the trade. There was something deeply satisfying in passing on my knowledge, in watching them grow and improve. It reminded me that while I had spent years being the one who took care of others, there was a power in being able to share something meaningful with someone else. On weekends, I took my days as they came. Some mornings, I spent reading, other times exploring the surrounding towns. The freedom to choose what I did, when I did it, felt like a treasure. For so long, I had been trapped in a cycle of obligation, and now I was breaking free. One afternoon, Michael came by again, this time with Ethan. He was carrying a small plant in his hands, the kind of thing that people bring as a housewarming gift, but Michael's eyes had a deeper meaning behind them as he handed it to me. "Mom," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "we've been talking, and we wanted to make things right again. We know we didn't understand before, but we do now. This is for you, to show you that we appreciate everything you've done and that you're important. You're not just Mom, you're Evelyn." I stared at the little plant, my hands trembling slightly as I took it from him. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. Ethan, seeing my emotional reaction, smiled and added, "We thought it would be nice for your garden." The words, simple as they were, felt like a balm for the wounds I'd carried for so long. I didn't need to hear them often, but when I did, it made all the difference. "That's very thoughtful, Ethan. I'll plant it in a special spot," I said, placing the plant gently on the table. "Thank you both." They left a little while later, and I stood in the doorway, watching as they drove away. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the distance between us wasn't a gap I was responsible for filling. I had given them all I could, and now it was their turn to meet me halfway. There was still work to do, but the burden wasn't entirely mine anymore. Later that night, I returned to the theater, walking through the backstage area where the stage props and sets were being prepped for a new performance. The crew was in full swing, but this time, there was a new feeling in the air. I felt at peace. This was my space now, and I was a part of something that valued my presence. Rachel smiled as she saw me, holding up her hands in a mock salute. "Ready for tonight's rehearsal?" she asked. I nodded. Absolutely. The night went on, just like the others. The lights dimmed, the actors took their places, and the scene began. But for me, it wasn't just another rehearsal. It was a reminder that I had finally found my place in the world again. As the curtain fell, I stood backstage, watching the final moments of the performance. There was no applause, no spotlight on me, but that was fine. I had already found the applause I needed, inside my own heart. In the weeks that followed, I made more changes in my life. I had taken charge, redefined my boundaries, and reclaimed my own sense of self. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt invisible. Every day, I woke up with purpose, knowing that I had the power to create the life I wanted. Sometimes, I would find myself thinking back to the old house, those long years of giving without receiving, of never feeling seen or appreciated. But now, I didn't need anyone to validate me. I had learned to validate myself, and that was enough. As I sat on my small balcony one evening, sipping my rose tea and watching the sunset, I realized that the stage wasn't just a physical place. It was a metaphor for my life. I had built it, and now I was living in it. The applause would come in different forms, in moments of connection, in the small victories, in the simple joy of just being. And that was more than enough.